if you have a procurement department, what have they put POs out for? When do they expect those POs to be delivered? How much are those POs for? Because then you can do some kind of causal plotting, and also have those wider conversations like, how many of these things are we planning on selling this year? And how regularly do we get these deliveries? So even if they are just kind of rough figures, at least there is a plan, and there's a realism about what is likely
because
to
otherwise
happen.
it's all historical based, isn't it? So it's not really any better than just looking at the profit and loss for the last 6 months and saying that's probably likely to happen anyway, so we're just back to that. So like you say, you've got to bring something from the present into it, haven't you? Something real,
something tangible. But also, if whilst you're doing this, if you've got this investment piece, or you're planning on expanding or growing the business, and you're going to use working capital to do that, actually, how much working capital do you have available to you to actually release into this?
Interesting to say about working capital. It's something a lot of my clients, it comes up, and most people don't know what their working capital is. Do you see that with your clients?
I absolutely see that. And as we were starting to speak about it, I was like, oh, are we going to get into like this technical minefield? So maybe like it would be a really good time for you to explain what working capital actually is.
Well, essentially, I suppose it's the money that you need, the cash that you need to run your business. Lots of different ways of looking at it. I was looking at it yesterday for a client who's actually selling their business, and as part of the deal, they leave the working capital in the company, which is quite common when you sell businesses. So how do you define what that working capital is? Well, one way is essentially the difference between your current assets and your current liabilities. So essentially trade debtors, so the amounts that are owed to you, and then the money that you've got to pay out. So your suppliers, corporation tax, PAYE, all of those. So essentially, how much money would you need to fund those liabilities? All your debtors come in, but you still might have a shortfall. How much do you need to plug that gap? But the other thing you've then got to bear in mind is that not all your debtors are going to come in at one point, and you might have a very large VAT bill in the first 5 days, even it could be coming up straight up. So actually, you need a bit more money than just that difference. So one thing I often say to clients, which I think is quite a good way of doing it, is if you look back, say over a 12-month period, what's the minimum amount that your bank balance has dropped to? Because technically that's excess cash, and anything above that is your working capital, because you know that your bank balances go up and down by that amount to fund the business. So with all the calculations, I actually think that's the best way of looking at it, just from actually what do you need to run it, rather than just a calculation. What's the movement in your bank? How much can you realistically go up and down by, but still know you've got enough to fund the business? And that's something that a lot of people don't know. So when you go, well, how much excess cash have you got in the business? They might say, how much could I take out? Well, what's your working capital? So you kind of got to work that out to know, okay, what is the excess cash?
What can I use? What is available?
Yeah, what might be there? They might want to buy another commercial premises and use some money in the company as a down payment on that. But you don't want to use too much, because obviously you might leave yourself in a position where you don't have enough to run the business. So it's quite an important calculation, I think.